According to legend, a horrific short story called Cowhead was discovered in Japan in the 17th century. The actual origin of the story is still shrouded in mystery. Several written accounts from this era make reference to the awful story, but they only mention its title and describe it as a tale too terrible to tell. Rumors state that upon hearing the dreadful tale, listeners were overcome with a terror so great that they trembled violently for days until they finally died. The Cowhead story was deemed too dangerous, and most existing copies were burned years ago. The few copies that survived were cut into sections and distributed across the country. Today, it is believed that only fragments of the original story still remain in existence. Most of the actual details of the story remain unknown. The unfortunate people who read the story never live long enough to repeat it. One recent rumor tells the story of an elementary school teacher who came into possession of some fragments of the original Cowhead story. According to the rumor, the teacher was taking his class on a school trip. He was in the habit of entertaining students on the bus rides with ghost stories. The students, who tend to become unruly on long trips, grew remarkably subdued as they listened to the teacher's horrific tales. Many of them seemed truly frightened. After some time, the teacher announced he would tell them the legendary forbidden tale called Cowhead. Before he could finish the first sentence of the story, however, the children began to panic. "Stop," they cried. "Don't tell us." One child turned pale and covered his ears, and the others began to scream, but the teacher refused to stop. They say his eyes went blank and he proceeded with the story as if some unseen force had taken over his mind. Almost an hour later, the teacher regained his senses and found that the bus had crashed into a ditch. The students had all fainted and were foaming at the mouth. The bus driver lay slumped over the wheel, sweating and shivering. It is unclear what happened next, except that the teacher never told the Cowhead story again. You won't find the Cowhead story on the internet, especially not in English, but I have read a summary of the first part in Japanese. From what I can understand, the story starts out something like this. There's a little deserted village in the middle of nowhere, and archaeologists are digging to find out why nobody lives there. They unearth a weird skeleton with the head of a cow and the body of a man. They do research and find out there is a famine. Everybody in the village is starving. They eat all the cows and horses, then they start on the pets, dogs and cats. There's nothing left, and people are dying from lack of food. One day, a stranger wanders into the village. He has the head of a cow and the body of a man. He is the Cowhead. The starving villagers attack him, brutally kill him, ripping him apart limb from limb, and finally eat him. That's when the village became cursed, and the rest of the story is lost to history. I don't think it exists anymore. The Red Cloak hides in the last stall of the girl's toilet, and when you enter, he steps out and asks, "Which do you prefer, red cloak or blue cloak?" If you say red, he slits your throat or chops your head off, and the blood flows down your back, making it look like you were wearing a red cloak. If you say blue, he grabs you by the neck and chokes you until your face turns blue and you die of suffocation. Don't even think about asking for the third color. If you do, the floor will open up beneath you and pale white hands will reach up and drag you down. One school ghost story tells of a young girl who heard a voice coming from the toilet next to her saying, "Shall we put on the red vest?" She got scared and ran away with her jeans around her ankles. She told her teacher what she had heard and the police were called. A policewoman went into the bathroom while her male partner waited outside. She heard the same voice asking, "Shall we put on a red vest?" The police officer, listening at the door, heard her answer, "Okay, put it on." Suddenly, a loud scream was heard, followed by a thump. When the partner opened the door, he found the policewoman lying dead on the floor. Her head had been cut off, and the blood on her clothes made it look like she was wearing a red vest. In Japanese, the murderous ghost is known as Akamanto. Some people say that Red Cloak was a young man who was so handsome that every girl immediately fell in love with him. He was so beautiful that girls would faint whenever he looked at them. His beauty was so overwhelming that he had to hide his face behind a white mask. At some point, he kidnapped a beautiful young girl and she was never seen again. In another version of the story, he is called the Red Mantle or Red Cape. He lurks in the toilets and asks you if you want a red cape. If you say yes, he rips off your top and tears your skin off of your back. In yet another version of the legend, he is called Red Paper, Blue Paper. Girls who go into the bathroom hear a voice coming from the last stall. It asks, "Do you want red paper or blue paper?" To answer red means a bloody death by being skinned alive. To answer blue means to have all the blood drained out of the body. Still, more versions involve a bloody hand emerging from the toilet and pulling you in, blood draining down from the ceiling, being drowned in blood, and having disembodied white hands grabbing you and choking you to death. There was a boy who was addicted to the internet. He heard an urban legend about the Red Room from one of his friends at school. That evening, when the boy got home, he went to the internet to see if he could find anything more about it. All of a sudden, a small window popped up with a red background. Written in black was the message, "Do you like?" The boy closed the window, but it popped up again. He tried numerous times to close it, but it just kept reappearing. Eventually, the boy noticed that the question had changed. Now it read, "Do you like the Red Room?" And in the background, a childlike voice said, "Do you like the Red Room?" Just then, the screen went black and a list of names appeared in red. At the bottom of the list, the boy saw the name of his friend, the friend who told him about the Red Room. All of a sudden, the boy became aware of something behind him, and he lost consciousness. The next day, the boy didn't turn up at school. There was a rumor going around that something had happened to him. The next day after that, his classmates heard the horrible news. The boy had committed suicide, painting his room red with his own blood. There was a blind old man who was attacked by robbers. They beat him viciously and left him to die alone in the field. As he lay dying, the blind man cried out in anger and frustration, "If only had I seen their faces, but my eyes can't see. If I only had eyes on the palms of my hands." Because he had died in such a state of rage and agony, the blind man returned as a ghost. His desire for revenge was so great that his blind eyes were gone, and he grew a new pair of eyes on the palms of his hands. Now, searching for the robbers who murdered him, he is able to see holding his hands out in front of him, but he never saw the face of his attacker, so he simply kills whoever he can get his hands on. Although he has eyes on his hands, he is still figuratively blind by his anger. One night, a Japanese boy was dared by his friends to go into a graveyard and test his courage. As the boy walked through the cemetery, he suddenly saw an old man emerge from the darkness. As the figure got closer, he noticed that the old man was blind and had eyeballs on the palms of his hands. The terrified boy fled as fast as he could. He ran into a temple and begged the priest to help him. The priest told him to hide in a chest and then went off to hide himself. When he finally entered the temple, he wandered around with his hands held out in front of him, searching for his prey. The boy crouched inside the chest, not daring to breathe as he listened to the sound of footsteps coming closer and closer to his hiding place. The footsteps stopped right next to him, and he heard a strange sucking sound. In the morning, the priest came out of hiding. He opened the chest to let the boy out, but when he peered inside, he was horrified. The young man was dead. Tenome had sucked all the blood and bones out of the boy's body, leaving nothing behind but his lumpy, saggy skin. Jinmenken are dogs with human faces. They are almost always seen at night in urban areas of Japan. Those who have seen them say they look just like an ordinary dog from afar, but when they turn around, you see that they have the face of a human. The Jinmenken are able to speak and often challenge witnesses in a weary voice, saying things like, "Mind your own business," or "I'm free to do whatever I want." In some reports, they are seen outside of people's houses, and in other reports, they are spotted chasing cars and frightening drivers on expressways. In one story, there was a restaurant that had dumped its trash outside the back door. One night, the chef saw a stray dog rummaging through the trash for leftover food. He went out to get rid of the dog, but when he tried to chase it away, the dog looked back over its shoulder and said, "Leave me alone." In another story, a man was driving on the highway and noticed the dog in his rearview mirror. It was chasing his car as he drove at speeds over 100 miles per hour. The dog ran so fast that at one point it was side by side with the car. The driver looked over and was shocked to see that the animal had a human face, and it said, "Don't look at me." The driver was so astonished that he veered off the road and suffered a terrible accident. The human-faced dogs are usually thought of as being a bad omen of things to come, and are often blamed for accidents and disasters. Between 1989 and 1990, hysteria about the Jinmenken reached its height in Japan. Auto accidents involving a sighting of the Jinmenken were so frequent that police had to investigate the possibility that the creatures actually existed. Some people believe that human-faced dogs are the spirits of traffic accident victims who have been reincarnated as dogs. Others believe that they are dogs possessed by evil spirits. Some even say that the Jinmenken are the human-dog hybrids who were created in secret biological experiments and managed to escape from the laboratories.